Welcome to the Top M&A's Entrepreneurs. This episode is brought to you by the Deal Flow System. And if you like this content, make sure you subscribe down below. Today, my guest is Iggy Domagalski. Iggy has made a number of acquisitions and now runs a company called Wajax, which is listed on the TSX with a market cap of over $450 million. Welcome, Iggy.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. So let's go back. And I would like to do this like you are Luke Skywalker and you get this call to adventure. How did you start?
I've always loved business. I always was drawn to it. I think about my family. My parents were entrepreneurs. We were immigrants to Canada. Still live in Canada, and when you're an immigrant, sometimes all the wonderful job opportunities aren't available to you, so you have to create them yourself.
Where would you immigrate from?
I was born in Poland.
Poland,
and then we immigrated to Winnipeg, which is where I lived for about 25 years with my folks.
My wife's half Polish. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So my kids are Polish, Scottish. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. But yeah, we ended up in Winnipeg, and both my parents were engineers, but the degrees, they don't really transfer over so well. So they began their entrepreneurial journey. So that was just kind of around the dinner table. It was business, and they owned retail stores. So myself and my sister would often be in those stores. So we kind of got to see it all unfolding, and I guess that's where I got my taste for it, and kind of liked it. Actually, when I was 12, I started a small little online business, kind of reselling some software. And
really,
and then,
what kind of software was it?
it was just this freeware that was available to be resold. And I mean, back in those days, geez, I'm dating myself here, but it was like a bulletin board service where it was all done through dial-up internet, and I had this CD-ROM that had software on it, and people could dial in from their computer, see that they could send me a check for $25, which they would mail to me, and then after I got the check, I would give them access to the software.
I love those stories, man. I love those stories. I used to go user groups in Silicon Valley a long time ago, and they'd bring boxes of CDs they actually exchanged. Like, this was before Bill Gates said, "Hey, no. Every piece of copy is every software is worth money."
Yeah. So I got in before the Bill Gates software thing. So I was able to make I was a 12-year-old kid, so I didn't make that much money, but certainly enjoyed doing that. And then just kind of had some entrepreneurial ventures as I grew up. Had a painting company and a couple other small businesses. And then I went to business school, and then I actually ended up going to work for a fairly large corporation, kind of in a rotational program. I got to see all the different elements of the business so it was an investment fund company.
Yeah, what kind of company was this? It was a investment banking company, or
it was like a mutual fund company.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got a chance to work on the trading floor, got a chance to work in sales, in training, in distribution, in corporate planning. So I got a chance to see a lot of it, and I liked all of those aspects. And it was a really fun ride. I had a great mentor over there who ended up leaving that company to start a new company. So I went along with him. We started another financial company, and then did that for a couple of years. And then same guy said that he wanted to move west, which is where he was from. And he wanted to go buy a bunch of small and medium-sized companies, and asked if I wanted to come along. I said, sure, but I have no money. But I was willing to put in just a whole pile of sweat equity. And that's kind of how our journey began.
And did he give you when it's sweat equity? Did he give you equity for your efforts? Small percent, yeah.
And then over the years we were able to buy more and earn more, and then through the years we bought a bunch of other companies. So that started about 16 years ago, and we both moved from Winnipeg out west. I ended up in Vancouver. He ended up in Calgary. So I was running one of our companies out in Vancouver. He was running one in Calgary. The one in Calgary was growing really quickly, and so I found someone to replace me in Vancouver, and ended up moving to Calgary. And then we kind of just got busy with buying other companies. We did a bunch of startups. So we did about 10 startups. Some made it, a small number made it,
Yeah.
and a lot failed, as is the case with startups. And then we bought over the years about 10 companies.
10 companies.
Uh,
What
yeah,
what's the makeup of those companies? What do they look like? It was like boring industry, niche, manufacturing, or food, or what? And the
yeah,
size. Yeah.
yeah. Good question. So most of them were in industrial products in kind of the distribution and service space.
Yeah.
That's when when my partner and I came from Winnipeg. We came from, it was a distribution business. I mean, the product that we manufactured was a mutual fund, but it's the same thing as you're still selling a product that you made, and convincing people that it's a good thing to buy. So
Right.
so we like the distribution business. Distribution of the actual product didn't really matter that much to us. We just wanted a good business in a good market that had good products or services. And so there's actually quite a few of those out there that you're able to find. All the businesses that we bought were fairly niche players, selling a fairly technical product, and neither my partner nor I were particularly technical in the industrial equipment space, but we knew that
Technical
there
meaning
were
it's kind of a software related business, or
technical meaning is just that it's complex.
okay.
There's some engineering and math behind figuring out which exact product you need for your application, and you really got to get that right, because often it's going on like a process kind of application. So there might be like high pressure gas or something that this thing is controlling, and so you can't really screw that up, otherwise things blow up. And so that's kind of what I mean by the technical nature of it. And neither him or I knew anything about that, but we knew that if we were buying these companies, that they would be full of really smart people that knew how to do that, and then that it was more our job, to work on things like the culture of the company, the brand, finding new growth opportunities in the company, and just generally growing it, and also acquiring other companies to bolt on so that we could make the
Yeah.
companies bigger.
Were these off market deals or on market, listed on a site or something, or do you just approach them directly?
It was a little bit of everything. That's a good question, John. We were, in some cases, they were listed on a kind of a brokerage listing service. Some of as we were getting into it, those were the first ones that we found, just because we weren't really tapped into the industry yet.
Right.
But once we got tapped into the industry, most of the ones that we found ended up being word of mouth somehow. And initially, most of the ones that we bought were quite small. And maybe 10 employees or 5 employees or 15 employees, kind of doing 10 million bucks of revenue, kind of those kind of companies.
Yeah.
And then over the years, we were able to afford a few bigger ones. But
How did you pay for those? Was it bring your own money, split of like some equity, split of seller financing, split of some bank financing?
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, it was our own money. It was bank financing, and it was vendor notes,
Yep.
for the most part. We never brought in any kind of external equity, so we never brought in private equity or really other investors. We always viewed equity to be kind of the gold piece that we really didn't want to dilute. We were happy to dilute with the management team, and we were usually aired on the generosity side when doing equity offerings for our management. But we really tried not to bring in external investors if we didn't need to, and we never needed to along the way. So the banks, we were I think doing a pretty good job of running the businesses, and I mean, I don't understand tech, so like tech type businesses where you can run a business and continuously lose money and it doesn't really matter. That is such a foreign concept to me. Like
That would keep me up over every night.
it really would. And so all the businesses that we always ran were profitable, and we thought about things like cash flow and profitability and what the balance sheet looks like, and what growth projections look like, and making sure that we had the right working capital. So those were things that we thought of all the time. And our banking partners saw that, and they saw that we had a good business that was growing, that was profitable. So they were pretty comfortable lending us money throughout the years. So it actually getting access to bank financing was never really a problem. Even when it was more challenging times, we had kind of taught us the importance of having really good banking relationships, like actually having a good relationship with the actual banker, like that person.
When
was
did you
really, really,
start that
really
relationship?
valuable.
Before you needed the money and say, "Hey, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's our pitch deck, our investment thesis. When we come across a deal, we'll do it." Or did you wait until you had a deal with an LOI?
We waited until we had some type of deal. We didn't really think there was too much value in starting a relationship on a hypothetical situation. So we started the relationship when we did have a deal. We were kind of almost military like in our packages that we would present to the bank, and it was really, really thought through. It had every little piece of information that they could ever want. And so that initial ask for money was pretty easy. And when you're buying an established business, that's been around for a decade, that's fairly consistent, it's actually a pretty safe investment for a bank. Like that is a way safer bet for a bank than giving you a bunch of money for a startup.
Yeah,
To
that's
buy
crazy. Yeah,
to buy an existing business is like there is a lot of money out there available for that very easily and very cheap.
yeah.
It's a really easy source of financing. So that's kind of when our relationship started, when we had a business to buy, and then the relationship evolved over the years. We spent a lot of time with them, really kept them up to date on our business. When we had big growth opportunities, which we did a few times during a downturn, like during the financial crisis, kind of 08, 09, when the world was falling apart, we had an opportunity to almost double our business by taking on a new product line, hiring a bunch of people, like doubling our headcount. And so we needed to go to the bank and say, "Hey, I know the world's falling apart here, but this opportunity is here. We've done a good job before, market conditions notwithstanding. We think this is the right thing to do, but we need some cash."
Yeah.
And yeah, it was no problem.
Did you
They were
buy
happy.
that product, or did they say, "Hey, look, we need to find a home for it"? Because I'm just curious how you found that opportunity in all the dust that was settling in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, it was so there was as a distributor, we sold products that other manufacturers made,
Yeah,
and there was a local competitor distributor who had lost the product line, a really, really wonderful product line, and we had the opportunity to take on that product line. So the investment on our end was, we had to hire a whole bunch of people so that we had the technical skills and the service people and the sales people to be able to actually run that business. And then we had to invest in some inventory to make sure that we actually had the product on the shelf. And then we had to invest in some capital assets so that we had, the appropriate testing equipment and all the tools and everything that our team needed to deliver the product and all the related services.
yeah.
So it worked out. It was wonderful. That was a great kind of kickstart for one of our companies, and in the middle of a financial crisis, it was pretty cool, and it worked
You're
out
making
really
money
well.
in it when everybody else is losing their homes. You're like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So that was a fun time.
yeah. So how big did you grow the business? I mean, did it double in the size, or
No, we grew it quite a bit. When we took it over, our kind of main one where we kind of amalgamated a few, it was doing 8 million in revenue when we bought it in
yeah.
2006, and then we grew it up to close to 200 million. So it was yeah, so it was so
That's a pretty good opportunity that the banks like.
yeah, so it was good growth. We kind of did the math, and we grew it at about 28% annual growth rate, like for a dozen years. So
Yeah.
it was hard to keep it, on the rails. Like that's a fast growth company. You're growing almost 30% every single year. And not every year is that good. So that means some years were less and some years we were even more than that. So some years were 50%. And that was for, you can do that for a short period of time, but we did that for a dozen years.
How were you? Were you working around the clock, or was it?
I would say I was pretty busy, but not around the clock. No. I mean, we all put in long hours, but I think we were all able to maintain a decent amount of work-life balance. I think.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten better at the work-life balance over the years. Certainly, there were times when it was more intense, but yeah, I think our kind of really believing in that family and health are your number one priority. That's always been the mantra
Yeah.
of our management team. We've pushed that to our people and as much as we can to ourselves as well.
Yeah. The relationship with your mentor, it's kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, how do you guys get along? Was he just teaching you everything you knew, or was it a, 50-50 kind of level playing field?
I so he was I mean, he was definitely the mentor in the relationship. So he's 20 years older than me, and had already had, a number of really interesting careers before I had even met him.
Yeah.
So he's been an incredible mentor to me. Still is to this day. And we talk all the time, and I bounce ideas off him and get his feedback on things. Where I think we were really good for each other is we balanced each other out. So we're like most people, we're two very different people. We're not exactly the same. Um, I would say that he was more the gas pedal, and like I would be a little bit more analytical on things. So
Yeah.
so I think that combination really helped us out. His gas pedal, pushed me harder, and my kind of more analytical mind helped him think through ideas a little bit more before we executed on something that might not have been the right decision.
Yeah.
I think we were a really good team for a long time, for over 20 years. We worked together, and we still do work together. But we had this main company that we were running called Tundra Process Solutions. That's the one that we grew up to about
200 million.
200 million. And then during the pandemic, we sold it. We sold it to a larger company called Wajax. So Tundra was a private Canadian company, and Wajax is a publicly traded company. And so they came along and said, hey, COVID's a weird time, but maybe it's something good can come of a weird time. And we came to a deal, kind of an agreement on the deal and the terms pretty quick. Took about 6 months to do the due diligence. And then in January of 2021, we kind of inked the whole deal, and it was done. And then at that time, my mentor, his name is Mike, he retired out of the business. So he was out of Tundra, and
that was his last kind of ride. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, well, no, as it turns
No.
out, that was his last ride with Tundra. So he wanted to, it was his largest holding, and he wanted to go do some philanthropic things, and so he exited out of that one. But he has 5 or 6 other businesses too that he still actively runs, and I'm a small part of some of those. So we still work together, just not on a full-time basis. So we definitely still spend time together. And and then the previous CEO of Wajax was retiring, and he asked if I wanted to put my name in the hat to be considered for the role, and I said sure, and went through that whole long process, which is the process of how a board chooses a new CEO for a publicly traded company.
The whole board and everything, yeah, and a shareholder vote, etc. Yeah,
exactly. So you could fill up a whole podcast just talking about that process, which is a very interesting process in itself, and it takes a really long time.
Were you waiting by the phone all the time? Like, do I really want this? Have to go through all this to get this?
Yeah, it took I don't know, like probably 7 or so months for the whole process to play itself through. It was a really good process. I wanted to go through it because they hired a firm to kind of do the evaluation of all the candidates, internal and external. And it's basically, the most deep 360 review that you've ever had on yourself. And they promised that regardless of the result of what happened with the search, that they would present all of their findings back to me. And I thought, well, I'm kind of a sucker for professional and personal development. So it wasn't cheap to do it. And so I thought, well, if I get this really wonderful review of myself and it helps me identify some blind spots that I have, that's worth it alone for me.
What were the blind spots that surprised you? That somebody else can see that, it's just a blind spot.
Yeah. One of the ones that was a little bit surprising, but now that, when somebody tells you something and it's a surprise at first, but then when you really think about it, it's obvious. Yeah. I had an aha moment with that. And for me, that aha moment is that, I'm like off the scales, I lead with trust. So I'm not the person that says, you have to earn my trust. And that's finally when I'll trust you.
I'll trust you implicitly until you give me reason to distrust you.
Yeah, exactly. So I start with trust until you prove me wrong. And so for me, that means, Ultimately, I probably give people more chances than others would.
Yeah.
Um, and so
Was that
that's
a
kind of how that
negative
plays
in
out.
such that if you hired somebody, you took too long to fire them? Is that what they were trying to get at, or a product line that didn't work and you kept trying it, or what? I don't.
I think that can be one of the negatives of being too trusting. But I think the counterbalance that they kind of brought up is you start things quicker if you intuitively trust the group that you're working with, you're more likely to advance an opportunity as opposed to say, you know what, I'm not too sure. Let's really build all the trust first before we do anything here, and then sometimes it just kind of dies on the vine.
Right.
So
That's what
so
the whole process of like, dude, don't put a lot of money in the products anymore. Just minimum viable product,
yeah,
just to make sure you don't get in front of your skis.
yeah, and I mean, it's just everyone's preference. I just prefer to trust. I prefer to believe in the good in people. I know there's bad people out there, and I know there's good people that do bad things. But I prefer to give people the benefit of the doubt. I prefer to lead with trust until proven otherwise. And I found that throughout my life, that really hasn't burned me. Like there's been a couple small cases where I've been burned by that, but the amount of benefit that I think I've gotten out of it versus the small amount of being burned is for me has been very much worth it.
So that's not a. So somebody said that's a blind spot. You took it internally, but it's not something you wanted to put a guardrail up because you've never wrecked the car on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me it was just really thinking about it and knowing about it. And now when I go into a situation, I consciously think about it. I think, okay, I'm going into this situation with full trust.
Yeah.
And I think just acknowledging that it's there helps you be a better leader.
Do you think you can, not that you're trying to train yourself to distrust people, but you can grow to uh, read people better? Kind of like if I look at Warren Buffett, how the guy can take a look at some financials over a weekend and make an offer because he trusts the people
Yeah.
by the financials.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just how I prefer to roll, and um yeah, I don't anticipate myself changing that, but being aware of it is a good thing.
Yeah. So back to this company that you grew to 200. How many acquisitions did you do for that? What, it was kind of like a spoken wheel, or did you just make one that just kind of took off because of you already had the channels for it?
Yeah, we did within that one, I want to say it was four or five. But most of the growth was actually organic. They were kind of like small tuck-ins that we bolted into the company, like a new small division here, or we needed a better capability and kind of like value-added service. So we bought a small company to do that. But most of the growth actually um, was fully organic. And so our philosophy was really how do we bring on more wonderful products? Like how do we sign manufacturers who make really, really great things and sell their product for them in our territory? And then how do we make sure that we have the best possible people who can, the best possible salespeople and the best possible service people who can just make it a success in our territory.
Yeah.
So that's really where the growth came from in our businesses.
How do you interview somebody that you're going to bring on to think sales or whatever position it is, where they're in the right culture based upon what you learned from your mentor and what you bring to the table? Like they're a good fit for the personality. I mean, what are you looking for?
That's a good question. I think back to how we were doing it 15 years ago, and it was pretty ad hoc, right? Like we made up some interview questions and we do our best, and ultimately it was okay. Do we like this person? Do they seem like they would fit in around here? And for salespeople, it was are they are they hungry? Like do they really want to go out there and get it? And most of our salespeople were on a quite a lot of their comp was variable. And so, like, are they excited about, landing big deals and being rewarded for that? As we went on, one of the most important things that we did was really clearly articulate what our kind of our big purpose was, kind of kind of going through like the whole mission vision process of the company. We did that. And then we really articulated clearly how we thought we would win, and how we went to market. And then we very clearly articulated our core values. And then we started to craft interview questions around those, and that made things easier because we talked about those a lot. We had those up on the wall in every boardroom and in all the hallways, and it was something that probably to the annoyance of our team, I always talked about. So every week, I would take 3 people out for a morning coffee. And it was all on one page. I'm just a fanatic for simplicity. So we had our kind of our mission and vision and our values and how we win and our 1 and 5 year strategy all on one page, easy to understand. And so I would bring that and we would just talk about it for an hour, and I would describe how we arrived there, why we're doing these things, how we're growing, what our values were, and we would just always talk about it. And so,
are you explaining it to them, or are you trying to weed out people to say, are you on the boat or not on the boat?
The purpose of these coffees, the kind of the once a week, we would just go out to Starbucks and have a coffee. It was explaining.
Yeah.
But what I found too is if people didn't really believe in it, ultimately they would just self-select out. Like if a senior leader in your company comes over and says, "Hey, this is what we're building, and this is what we're doing for the next 5 years," and you look at that piece of paper and you say, "I don't think I want to do that," like you'll go start looking for another job on your own.
Yeah.
But I thought that we had a pretty compelling plan on this paper, and I think most people agreed with that. And we didn't have any big attrition from doing that. I think if anything, it excited people. It really focused our company. I would say there was a period of time where we were a bunch of dogs chasing shiny bumpers, right? Like anything that was shiny, we're like, "Ooh, what's that? Woo, woo, woo," and then go start chasing it. And because it was a good opportunity. Hey, there's money to be made. It's exciting. It's in a new market, or even in a new country. We pursued some work in the Middle East. Like we were doing things quite a bit outside of what we knew and what we were good at, because we didn't have a good set of goalposts of what we actually wanted to do, what we believed we were really great at, where we could add value, where we had knowledge, all of those things. And when we refocused the company and had that clear purpose, mission and vision and values and how we win, man, it made all those decisions so easy. So whenever, hey, should we do this thing in Mexico? Like, no.
So what is your mission vision where it disqualified those opportunities? What is that?
So our big goal was to be the most trusted supplier of industrial process equipment in Western Canada. That was it. And
so this is interesting because you say the most trusted supplier, and your big characteristic or behavior is like, I'm trusting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it all came together. But that's what we want. That's what we want it to be. We want it to be the most trusted, and it was around industrial process equipment, and it was Western Canada. And that's a short number of words, but it was very powerful and very focusing. So when opportunities would come up, and it would happen almost on a weekly basis. Hey, we got an inquiry from a customer in Venezuela, as an example, which happened Venezuela, Mexico, Africa, Europe, right? Like these things. I said, well, it says Western Canada right there, and then that would actually end the conversation, right? Like we wouldn't have to take an hour or two to go through a presentation, and these people wouldn't have to spend days putting together all the information and the research. The answer was no before it even started, because we just knew where we wanted to play.
Saying no instead of chasing rabbits. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we stopped chasing those shiny bumpers and started to focus, and our people really liked that too. They just they knew where they were going, they knew what they were doing, and it made everyone's life a little bit easier, and it made us more successful too. So they worked out pretty good.
Can you give me an example of, like, when you say trusted? I understand, like, when you say, okay, this is the price of the product and that's the price you'll get. It's not what somebody else, this is it. Let's say delivery time, we're going to get this product to you. But if something happens where, semi goes off the road and you can't get it to the product. I mean, what do you do when you say, I want to live within that most trusted supplier?
Yeah, that's a good question. And where one of the sayings that we had is who would you rather be in trouble with? And when you're dealing with industrial process equipment, just things go wrong, right? Like the things get installed incorrectly in the field and they break. There's a lot of components that go into these things, and especially these days, supply chains are busted, and sometimes things are late or they're wrong or they're broken, and it happens. And that wasn't just our company; that's every company that deals in this kind of equipment. Things just go wrong, and we always hoped that our customers would kind of internally say, okay, well, if we're going to get into trouble with anybody, we hope that it would be Tundra, because we know that they'll go to the ends of the earth to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And we gave our people the freedom to do that. So we have something called Make It Right, where people could spend up to a certain amount of money without asking anybody. They just have the authority to do that on the spot to fix a problem. And they could spend more. They just have to kind of ask somebody. And we did that in a big way. Like sometimes we spent millions of dollars to make a problem right. And every time we did that, we found that customer over the coming years just would turn out to be our best customer, and our
Net promoter scores off the roof, huh?
Oh yeah, and translating into like 10x in business because of what we did. Just because they knew that when things went wrong, we had their back. And if that even with a friend, if you know that you get in trouble, if they have your back, they kind of by definition become your most trusted friend, right? And so that's really what we tried to build, and I think it worked pretty good. It still is working really good. Tundra remains a wholly owned subsidiary of Wajax, operates on its own, has its own CEO, and it's doing better than ever. So it's
yeah. I got to tell you about that. Who do you want to be in trouble with? It sounds like you're almost talking about the tenets of working with the Navy SEALs, is because who do you want to be, like the guy with the ego, or who do you want to be in trouble with? It's the guy that goes to the ends of the earth to save you, take you out, whatever.
Yeah. So we there are numerous examples of where we did that for our customers, and I would also say that I thought we did that for our people too. People go through things, right? Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Yep.
And we always kind of thought that a company, and then the leadership in a company can make the biggest impact on an individual, in their times of greatest happiness and greatest sorrow. And so whenever there was, really happy things like babies and weddings, we would always be there to do something special. And when there was, really sad things like death or illness, we would always be there to do something pretty special.
How did you do that when you grew to 200 million? It's easy to do when there's 10 people or 50 people in the office, but now you got 1,000 people.
I haven't quite figured it out. At Wajax, we have 3,000 people.
3,000,
and I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I've been in this role of running Wajax just for 8 months, so we're really trying to figure out how we can continue to do more for our people, especially in their in those moments. But with a 150, 200 person company, it was quite manageable.
Yeah.
I still knew pretty much everyone that worked in that company, and they have managers too who knew everything about them, so it wasn't too difficult.
So Wajax is almost over 100 years old, the company.
We're 165 years old, which actually makes us 9 years older than Canada.
And the culture of yours, you had a fast growth over 12 years. Did your cultures mix, or was there any part that didn't mix?
Well, the companies are still quite separate. So Tundra runs on its own, and a few people from Tundra have kind of made their way over to Wajax, including myself. I would say that I'm probably used to a faster pace of growth, but we're also growing on a bigger number, right? Like it's if you're growing on a $100 million number, it's easier to put up higher percentages than if you're growing on an almost $2 billion number. So we're I'm accelerating the acquisition program at Wajax. I've got a passion for doing acquisitions and buying companies, and
What kind of size companies are you do now that just move the needle? It's like, well, we can't do that one below $10 million, but we can do this $100 million one.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of the numbers, John. Companies that will do 10 million and slightly under in revenue as add-ons, but they have to be like a strategic bolt-on that really fits, and gives us an extra capability, or it's in a so across Canada we have 117 branches, but we're in almost every community. But, if it gives us an extra community that we want it to be in, that would make sense, or an extra capability that would make sense. So we'll do that. But really, we're looking for the larger ones. Tundra was that kind of an acquisition, and so I'd like to do more of those. They just come along less often. The market that we operate in is highly fragmented. There's a lot of companies out there that are kind of that 10 million revenue mark, and we're happy to do 3 or 4 of those a year. But as the bigger ones come along, we certainly want to do those, because those are the ones that really move.
Yeah. Do you have an investment bank working for you now to find those deals, or did they flow up from your sources, or all of the above?
Yeah, we have numerous investment banks and brokers that we work with. We have an individual in our company. He's a vice president of corporate development. His 100% of his job is finding and buying companies. So he's got all the relationships with the people that also have the relationships. So the deal flow is actually pretty good. We get a lot of opportunity coming our way, especially over the last couple of years. We have been buying a decent amount of companies. We bought 3 in the last year. So
3 in the last year since you've started as CEO. 8 months.
Yeah. Two since I started, and then 1 right before that. So we're actively doing it, and when we do it, we press release it, and we try to make a little bit of a splash about it, and so that just kind of gets around industry. It's not that huge of an industry, so people know that we are actively doing it. And I think there's a real kind of a chance of deal closure risk, or whatever you want to call it, that there's a lot of people that sniff around and ultimately don't buy, but I don't think we fall into that category. I think we fall into the category that when we're interested in something, we make an offer, it's a real offer, and there's a very high chance that we're going to close it unless something really weird comes up. And I think that a lot of it's reputation that gets around, and I think that's our reputation, that if we're going to do something, we're going to do it. We're not just kicking tires.
Yeah, and it's a fair offer, competitive offer, or it's a higher offer. What is there a kind of a style that you like to come in on an offer?
We definitely don't overpay. I think we pay fair. When I think about what a seller wants, obviously, money's important, and they need to feel that they're getting a fair price. But more often than not, even more important to the sellers is what's happening to my baby. I've been running this company for 20 years. I started it. What's the fate of this company? What's the fate of all the people that work here? And
I think you trump that with, well, we're a 160-year-old company. I mean, we're going to take care of you.
Yeah, and that's part of the the conversation, saying we've been around a long time. We buy companies, we don't really sell them, we hold on to them, so it's a nice permanent home for all of your employees, which was a really attractive thing for us when we were selling Tundra. It was a good permanent home for our employees, and there was a lot of promises made to me by the previous CEO, and they sounded something like this. They said, we're going to leave the brand alone, at least for a period of time, so you can still operate as Tundra. We're not going to mess with your systems. You do have to take on our safety program because it's a little bit better, and over time you got to take on our computer system, but how you sell and all that, we're not going to change any of that. And we plan on laying off 0 people. The reason we're buying this company is for the people, and we want to keep everybody. So those were the promises that were made, and every one of those promises was kept in spades. And when there were surprises, there was positive surprises, like extra bonuses for our people, right? Like, so there was good surprises that happened along the way.
You really managed expectations about. I saw. It seems like the culture really was a good mesh.
It was, and it is, and so I think going into some of these conversations with with the owners of these businesses, when I'm chatting with them, I can say, it is a good permanent home. And, I was exactly in your shoes 2 years ago, and a bunch of promises were made to me. And this is how it all rolled out and played out. And I can point to, all of our acquisitions that we've done, and they've all pretty much played out like that. So, I think it's hard for other buyers to come in and give that kind of a track record. Like if you're a private equity company, the model is usually pretty simple, right? Like you put a bunch of debt on the balance sheet, often you cut a bunch of heads, and you squeeze the business for
Renegotiate
all
the terms and price maybe through that 90, 120 days. Yeah.
Yep, and then you squeeze a business for all the cash that it has for the next 5 years, and then you flip it, right? And so, I mean, that's not the worst fate in the world, but it's I don't think it's nearly as good as the future that would
Yeah.
be in
Do you still get
for the ones that we
involved
like.
with the conversations with the sellers, or kind of like Mark Leonard or Cisco, where it dropped down to the business unit GMs?
It depends on the size, if it's and on the relationships. If one of our people already has a tight relationship with the seller, which is sometimes the case, then I let them run with it. If it's a little bit bigger or a new one to us, then I'll for sure get involved a little
Yeah.
bit. And I'll get involved more the larger the deal is, and the more that they need me. I mean, some sellers, it's a pretty unemotional transaction. It's like, just give me a fair price, tell me my people are going to be good, and
I don't need to
and
talk to
and
the
I'm
CEO.
yeah, and I'm out.
Yeah.
And then for other sellers, they want to look me in the eye, they want to shake my hand, and they want to know that what I'm telling them, at least they want to hear it from me. They want to make their own evaluation if it's true, and if they trust me that what I'm telling them is true. And I'm more than happy to do that, because I think
Yeah.
it's super important.
Do you like running a public company with all the swings of what the street wants, doesn't want, or you know?
I really, really do. I wasn't sure if I would. I had never run a public company before, so it was new to me. And I mean, what I found is we just have an incredible team. They know what they're doing. We've been around 165 years, and we've been public for a long time. So it's not like I have to go in and reinvent anything, right? Like
There's no new story to tell here, right?
there's a machine that works. Every quarter when the results come out, all these things happen. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do, and I know it's just my job to get on the analyst call and answer the analyst questions, which I'm usually prepared for by our team. So I've really been enjoying it. So I like talking to investors, either existing or potential investors. I love telling our story. I think it's a really exciting story to tell. I think we have just a ton of growth opportunity, and I really like dealing with our board. We have a really, really wonderful board who are ultra supportive of me and management, and they kind of leave us alone to do our own thing. And they that whole thing where the board's supposed to have their nose in but their fingers out. That's a phrase that boards use. They live that. They allow us to set the strategy, and then they just kind of approve the annual budgets and approve all the things that a board's supposed to approve. And they're really, 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 really smart.
Is there anybody
Really
ancestors from founders still on the board? Some way back?
No.
No.
It's a fully independent board, and they're all just wonderful. I mean, just the experience and knowledge that some of these folks have is quite incredible. I feel pretty lucky that we have them. So I bounce a lot of ideas off them, and talk to them offline between board meetings to get advice. And so I've really been enjoying it. It's only been a short time. Maybe I'm still in the honeymoon period, but if it keeps going like this, I think I'm in for a pretty fun and enjoyable ride.
Yeah. What's the goal? I mean, does the board want you to continue a specific growth per year? And just keep doing the same thing and employing great people, being the most trusted. Did they incorporate your missions and values, or do they already have a mission value statement almost similar?
Interestingly, the company's been around for 165 years. We don't have a mission and value statement. We don't have a mission and vision statement. We don't have an accepted written down set of core values. And so that's one of the first things that I'm working on here. So we've kind of launched that journey that we're going on for the next year to really articulate that. And I think that will make our lives much easier. Again, as it was at my previous company, once we got that in place, my job becomes easier. It becomes a lot more repetitive because that's all I ever talk about, is just going around talking about what our mission and vision and values are and how we win and how we go to market. But we're just in the process of starting that journey. So that's kind of the next big thing, getting all of that on a piece of paper, and then really disseminating it through all of our leaders and to the front lines. And yeah, as I go around to our branches and talk to our people, that's what I'll be talking about once it's done. But it'll probably take us a year to really get it done well.
I see where that vision mission statement can create trust, because you also create independence. Because, should I take this deal in Latin America or Saudi Arabia? Yes or no, right? Before, no, but now, such your big company, yeah, we could do it.
Yeah, and ultimately that will be our, as we decide, if our final place where we land on is we're a Canadian only company and that's how we're staying for the next decade, then again, that'll make it really easy. When opportunities come in that aren't Canadian, then no thanks, and we'll move on. But that'll be a really fun journey of what we land on, and that will really set the tone for what the next decade will look like.
Yeah. Iggy, thank you so much for being on the show. That was very, very interesting. I appreciate it. You are my first guest that's running a public company.
Oh, awesome. Well, I was thrilled to be on the show. Thanks for having me here, John. I love M&A and I love talking about it. And, if I think that, entrepreneurship and buying businesses is just a wonderful way for people to build skills and build a great life. So any kind of piece that I can do to help get people excited about that always makes me quite excited.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
All right. Take care.
You too.